This is the GMBN Tech Essentials Series. It's our easy to follow guide to setting up your bike and maintaining it yourself at home. In this video, we're showing you how to replace your chain and cassette. These are consumable parts of your transmission that endure a lot of abuse from pedaling and shifting, and of course the conditions that you actually ride in. They wear out and will need replacing, which is actually a pretty simple thing to do. So here's how you change them and what you need to do that yourself. To do this job at home, you're going to need a few tools. First up, you need a chain wear indicator. It's a really useful tool for any mountain biker to have because you can monitor the wear of your chain, which in turn will tell you when you need to replace it, and of course that cassette as well. You're going to need a cassette removal tool. There's various different types. You're going to need one that's compatible with your particular setup. And then to go with that, you're going to need a chain whip, and you're also going to need either an adjustable spanner or a vise in which to hold that cassette tool. You might also want to have some protective rubber gloves because it can be a bit of a greasy job, some chain lube for afterwards, some shop towel, and of course a chain splitter. Now first up is the question, when do you actually need to replace your chain and cassette? Now there's no actual fixed rule or fixed mileage, especially with mountain bikes, when you should be replacing these items, because it totally depends how often you ride, how hard you smash through those gears, and of course those weather conditions that you ride in, and of course actually how well you maintain or how well you don't maintain your bike, because mud and grime and all the other stuff builds up and it makes this horrible little grinding paste which can wear things out quicker, which is why we always tell you to look after your bikes. Now having a chain checker is a really good thing to have because it's sometimes possible to get 2 or 3 chains worth of use out of one cassette if you make sure that you replace your chain before it's completely worn out. The reason for that is the chain will minutely stretch over its time on the bike, and basically all that means is it will be contacting different parts of your sprockets than what it's designed to, and of course that will make it wear out those sprockets. So what you're looking for is using a chain checker such as this. There's a few different types on the market. It indicates the amount of stretch on there. If it's above 0.75, you've got to replace that chain immediately. That's really, really worn. And at the same time, you're going to need to replace the cassette as well, sadly. If you've got 10 or few gears on your bike, say 7, 8, 9 or 10-speed transmission, you can go up to 0.75. That's your roof of where you need to replace it. If you've got 11 or more gears, it's 0.5 when you should replace it. The simple way you would measure that is by slotting the tool straight into the chain there and simply adjusting it until it's a firm fit, and then basically looking at the number reading on the inside there, and that will correlate to if you need to replace your chain, if you need to replace your chain and cassette immediately, or if you've got a bit more wear to go. But remember, you can always get more life out of a cassette if you're quicker to replace the chain, which of course will save you money in the long run. Now the reason you want to make sure you replace the chain sooner rather than later is simply because as the chain stretches, even though it's a minute amount that you'll never be able to see as such with your eye, think how precise the actual components are in the whole transmission. Now, although the transmission of a bike is quite mechanical in the way it operates, it actually needs to be quite precise still. So any sort of stretch you're going to get on the chain's not going to sit correctly on those sprockets. And when you put load through it, it can actually put load on the wrong part of the actual teeth there, which over time will actually turn those into little sharp fins, and then the chain is never going to grip on them. So as a result of that, you can get chain slipping, you'll get problems with shifting, a whole number of other issues. I have seen people hold on to the same chain and cassette combination for years, but they've always been plagued by terrible shifting, snapping chains, all that sort of stuff. If you want your drivetrain to work well and be as efficient as possible, keep on top of this stuff. So when it comes to replacing your chain and cassette, you've got a few options available to you. So if you're doing a straight swap, it's nice and simple. You pretty much want to replace like for like. At this point, you have the option of upgrading your chain and or cassette for something slightly higher quality, which might mean you either save weight or you increase durability, or better still, both. So those options are available to you. There are 2 main types of cassette out there. There's the Sram pattern and there's the Shimano pattern, which is a bit more classic. So the Shimano pattern involves a hub with splines on, just like this one here. Now the way the cassette works is the cassette literally slides onto those splines, and then the lock ring, like this one on my hand here, slides onto the end and screws into the threads on the free hub body of the hub itself to secure the cassette in place. If you're using the Sram system, it's a slightly different system. The cassette still comes off in one piece, but the actual carrier system is slightly different. So it pushes on and the whole cassette threads onto the actual body itself. And the reason for that is the SRAM cassettes tend to have this tiny little 10-tooth sprocket. And to allow this, they can't use a traditional lock ring system because, simply put, the 10-tooth is too small. So they invented their own carrier system and it has its own separate freehub body known as the XD driver. So if at this point you're going to be replacing a SRAM cassette onto a SRAM XD driver, it's quite a lot simpler than replacing the Shimano style equivalents where you actually have to push on each part of the cassette bit by bit onto those splines. With the SRAM style cassette, it's a one-piece unit, so it's a lot more simple. And it's just a case of literally sliding it onto the body there. In an ideal world, you want to make sure this is nice and clean and greased. This is just to demonstrate how the system goes together. You then simply insert your cassette tool into the bottom of the cassette there, and then using your adjustable spanner, or if you've got one, put the hole into a vise and spin it around, basically, and it will find its way on. Pretty much use it like a ratchet. There we go. Now there are various different models of chain available on the market. Now SRAM will always recommend you use a SRAM chain with a SRAM cassette, and the same with Shimano and Shimano cassettes. However, there are some other brands available on the market that are compatible with both options, so there are no issues there. The most important thing is you could choose a correct speed chain to go with your cassette. 10-speed chain with a 10-speed cassette, 11-speed chain with an 11-speed cassette, and so on. This particular one is a chain made by Box Components. Comes in a box, nice and simple, and it has its own joining master link. Now most chains these days will come with some kind of joining master link. It simplifies the process of joining a chain. You pretty much can't get this wrong. It's a very simple process, and we're just going to guide you through how you do that. So before we go into taking the chain and cassette off the bike in order to replace them, let's have a look at a couple of the tools available to do this. Now the obvious choice is to use a chain splitting tool. This is a workshop sized option, which is obviously super sized for easy use, but you can get these on various different multi-tools that we actually use ourselves as well. Now on the multi-tools that you tend to get, you'll get ones that will have single and twin jaw options on there. The first set of jaws will sit nearest the outside of the tool. That is your classic set for just holding the chain in the correct position to drive the pin out of the tool. You would then flip the tool round to push the pin back in, but as a result of that, sometimes you would actually squash the outer links against the inner links, causing a stiff link. If that happens, you would then put the chain into the secondary set of jaws, and when being held on a secondary set, the outside links can be pushed away fractionally. We're talking the tiniest bit, and all you would need to do is just adjust the tool up against that. Of course, that isn't a problem we have here. All we need to do is split the chain, and that's as simple as sitting a chain on the tool and driving that pin out. You use the driver to make sure it sits on there squarely, and then you can tighten it up. There's usually a click as it unseats the pin from the other side. And then you can simply pull the links apart. The other option is you might be lucky enough to have some of these or have access to some of these. These are called chain splitting pliers. Now if your bike has got a master link of any kind on there, like this one has, you can use these pliers to split that, bang, pops open, and you don't even need to use the chain splitter. You can identify the master link by the markings on it, and you can see the fact it's got an open section. This is so when I split the link, it can come apart. The pliers simply go either side of this, and you literally pop them together and you'll see that pin move, just like so. And the chain can literally be pulled apart. And you can take off those pieces of master link. Now, just before you split it, you want to make sure you're shifted into the smallest sprocket at the back. So that is so the chain has the least amount of tension on it. It makes the job a bit easier for you. The next one, if you're lucky enough to have a SRAM derailleur on your bike, they have a lock on them. So you definitely want to make sure that lock is engaged. Again, it just takes all of the tension off the chain. If you've got a Shimano derailleur on it and it has a clutch, just make sure you turn that off. Now, just an additional safety point for later on as a mountain biker, if you need to split and rejoin a chain at any point, if possible, rejoin them using a master link. Now using a chain tool, you can split and rejoin as many times as you fancy, but on many modern chains, the pin shape itself is slightly flanged at one end when it sits onto the outer plate on the other side. And when you push it out and you push it back in again, the fit will never quite be the same again, and that creates a weak link within the chain. And of course, if it's going to snap anywhere, that is exactly where it will snap. So for that reason, you should always try and make sure you keep a relevant master link, 10, 11, 12 speed, whatever it is to suit your chain. Keep one of those in your riding bag. With the chain removed from the bike, your next job is simply to remove your rear wheel. Because the chain is already removed, this makes it a lot easier. The wheel will just slide straight out, and you've got access to that cassette. Now, in order to remove your cassette, this is where the chain tool and the cassette tool come in. Now, the reason you need these specific tools is the cassette tool slides onto the lock ring here and is used for undoing the lock ring. But of course, because the whole system has a freewheel on it, if you were just to undo that cassette tool with it in place, it would spin the cassette backwards. So the chain whip's job is to hold a cassette still in order for you to undo that lock ring. So at this point, you can decide if you want to mount your tool into a vise, and then you can use the chain whip and then turn it in the direction to undo it, or like I'm going to show you, using an adjustable spanner. So there are various different patterns of chain tool on the market. This is the pretty standard one, but it's actually got a new feature on it just to slide on the inside of through axles. You don't actually need this one. You can happily do it with one of the original style ones as well. It's a case of literally sliding this into the end so it meets with those splines, nice and secure. Next up, you put the chain whip around the cassette. Higher up you go, the more leverage you've got. Now remember, this is just to hold it static. You're actually doing an undoing motion with this. Don't get drawn into trying to undo it with the chain whip, like I've seen many people do, and then the chain whip actually slips. The obvious way to do this is having a wheel between your legs, using your weight advantage to push it down and loosen that lock ring. Once it comes loose, you'll be able to remove the spanner and chain whip from it, and just using the tool with your fingers, just undo it and then remove the cassette in pieces. Now, the first thing to note before installing your new cassette is the orientation of the splines. Now, on the classic Shimano pattern, you'll see that one of these splines, this one here in the middle at the top here, is slightly bigger than the rest of them. So you've got to make sure, obviously, that that correlates with the biggest spline on the hub itself before you can slide them on successfully. Now, when you're installing these, you pretty much have to do them one by one. So again, make sure that they go on with spacers in between them, and you've got them the correct orientation. So the number, this one's a 19 tooth, make sure it's facing out towards you, otherwise you're going to be sitting there trying to get the thing on. You're not going to get it on. Okay, so literally just take your time, make sure they're lined up correctly, and they'll slide on nicely. And make sure you send them home. Again, next one up, slides on. The next one is a spacer. So again, make sure the orientation is correct on there. I've got the big slot facing me just so I can see that. Nice and easy. And then when you've got all of them on and you check that it's all pushed down and it's seated correctly, then it's time to get your lock ring and slide that on the end. Now, this particular hub has already got a bit of grease on it, but it's well worth putting just a smidge of grease just on your threads there. Just make sure it can go in nice and tight. Now, you should be tightening the lock rings to 40 Newton meters as it specifies on the outside there. But if you haven't got a torque wrench at hand, you can just tighten these up fairly tight. There we go. And you're good to go. Now, just before I go any further, I'm just going to give the derailleur itself a bit of a wipe down, make sure those guide wheels are nice and clean, because I'm putting a nice new chain on there, so you want to make sure it stays shifting as clean as possible for as long as possible. And of course, all that dirt and grime can get in the way of that stuff. So just before you install the new chain, you just got to make sure it's the correct length. Now, this is the easy bit because you've actually removed the chain from your bike, so pretty much hold them up and like for like, you want to match the lengths and then split the chain at the relevant part. Now, with some 12-speed chains, there is an orientation to the way the chain has to sit against the actual sprockets, but with this 11-speed one, it doesn't actually matter. So I'm just going to run the chain over the drivetrain itself, get this in place, ready for rejoining. Make sure that you correctly route the chain around those guide wheels, goes over the top one, under the bottom one there, and then you're going to be in a position to get those links together. Now this is the fun bit. You've got your two bits of the master link, so pass one through one end of the chain, the other through the other end, and of course you just want to simply join them up by sitting them on each other. So there you go, they're sat in place. I'm just going to try and pull that tight. There we go. Now I just want to make sure that these are snapped in place, and the best way to check this is cycle this power link or master link all the way until it's at the top end here, and in that way you put your back brake on, put some pressure on the cranks, and it will pull against it. Now you'll actually find with any new chain it's got a very sticky sort of residue on it. That's factory grease that's part of the chain manufacturing process. Now there's two schools of thought with this residue. Some people like to degrease the chain before they even get it onto the bike and make sure they're starting fresh, but I actually think that that factory grease is pretty good stuff. However, it is very sticky, so I like to just put a bit of WD-40 on a rag, not applying directly to the chain, and just use it to wipe the outside links clean. And the reason for that is that sticky residue does attract a lot of dust, grit, and all that sort of horrible stuff that does wear your chain out. I'll then do my first few rides, depending on weather conditions, then when I next clean my bike, then I will apply a decent chain lube. Then of course the last thing you want to do is just cycle the bike through the gears, make sure everything is lined up nicely and it's working, and you're ready to hit the trails. It's that simple. But of course don't forget to get yourself a chain checker tool. They're really, really worth the money, because it does mean for every cassette you're likely to get a couple of chains out of it. For a couple more useful videos, click down here on how to change all the gear cable housing, the inner cable, the outer cable, the whole lot, and click down here if you want to know everything about the derailleur, how it works, and how to index your gears. As always, if you like GMBN Tech, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.